Hi, welcome to our session Keep Hackers Out, a use case led approach to G Suite security. I'm Sam Lugani and I look after security PMM for G Suite and GCP platform.
And I'm Chad Tyler, and I'm a product manager for G Suite Security.
Now, this session is a little different. We only have a few slides to introduce the topic, but the majority of this session is going to talk about the top security use cases we hear from customers, and we'll show you how to solve them in product. Your feedback on this demo based presentation is very welcome. Now, IT teams are trying their best to navigate the challenges of COVID 19. Phishing is still one of the most effective methods that attackers use to compromise accounts and gain access to company data and resources. In fact, bad actors are creating new attacks and scams every day that attempt to take advantage of the fear and uncertainty surrounding this pandemic. And we've seen more than 18 million daily malware and phishing emails related to COVID. Now, due to ever changing attacker tactics, these threats are really hard to detect. And coupled with possible employee negligence and a rise in ransomware lately, keeping organizations secure is really no easy task for an admin. But not just admins, users also need controls and warnings that are intuitive so that they can become part of the security ecosystem and help in addressing threats that may arise. And that's where a pure cloud native solution can help. Now, Google started in the cloud and runs in the cloud, and it's no surprise we understand the security implications of powering your business in the cloud. Because Google and our enterprise services run on the same infrastructure, your organization benefits from the protections we've built and use every day. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that in security, scale matters. And I'm going to say that one more time. Scale matters a lot in security. The security signals we have access to allows us to create better machine learning models so that we can automatically identify and protect against sophisticated attacks and emerging threats. As an example, Gmail blocks more than 100 million phishing emails every day, and we scan about 300 billion attachments for malware every week. Now, the breadth of these security signals and analyzing and correlating them is what we do really well. And by understanding these attack patterns, we can constantly update our ML models and better protect our customers. Now, with G Suite, we offer you a secure, reliable, and compliant suite that you can trust. There's three areas where we spend a lot of time on. Now, admins can often get more than 5,000 alerts every day. With that volume of alerts, it's no surprise that almost half of these are never investigated. There is so much information that is constantly being thrown at you that it makes it very difficult to separate the signal from the noise. And that's where G Suite can help provide a very simple and comprehensive view into your organization's security posture and making sure that you get the most important updates in one place. Now, secure email is another area we take great pride in. We have built-in defenses against ransomware and polymorphic malware and block millions of additional emails that can harm users. Now, we classify new threats by combining thousands of spam, malware, and ransomware signals with attachment heuristics and sender signatures. And machine learning helps Gmail block spam and phishing messages from ever showing up in your inbox with over 99.9% accuracy. But at the end of the day, security tools are only helpful and useful if you can actually deploy them. If they're too difficult or complicated, they're of very limited use. And that's where G Suite gives admins simpler, more streamlined ways to manage users, control devices, ensure compliance, and keep data secure. And with everything in the cloud, IT can now maintain full visibility and stay on top of sensitive events such as provisioning new employees, updates, and security patches. hand, all these features work really cohesively together. So we have default on endpoint management, wherein if anyone logs in with a device in G Suite, their device automatically shows up, and without the need of installing a profile, the admin gets basic controls on that device. Advanced phishing protection is default on, so no matter what G Suite SKU you're on, you get these features default on. If you want additional protection, you can add advanced protection program, which is for any user that uses G Suite or who has a Google account. Now, the admin still might want to go and check on whether certain users are being targeted by attacks or if there's any suspicious device activity. And she can log into the security center and make sure everything there is in order. One of the dashboards tells her that some of files within team drives are being shared externally. She can check the new team drives IRM controls, block files from getting shared, and later we'll actually show demos for this. And again, there's Google Vault, which can help you with email archiving and setting legal holds as well. Now with that, I want to transition over to the use case based demos that we have. And this again, are some of the top questions we get from customers on how to solve security issues in their deployment. So one of the first questions we get is, how do I configure my new organization to best protect my data? So I have G Suite. What are the first few things I can do right away? Now this is the admin console. I'm logged into an entity which is called Inc42. That's the organization. And here you can see all the devices that are logged into the organization. Now, if I click on endpoints, I can see that I have Sam's Mac has just logged in less than an hour back, and the admin knows what OS I'm on. The admin can proactively click on my device and sign me out or delete my device. And this is true without me having to install a profile on my device. And that holds true for iOS and Android as well. Now, what that does is that no matter which device the user is on, and even if they don't want to install a profile, the admin gets some basic controls on that device. Next up is security health. Now, this is a very powerful tool because a lot of problems happen due to misconfigurations. Now, with security health, we're going through all the security settings in G Suite and we're mapping them to Google's best practice recommendations. The stuff which maps Google's best practice recommendations, for example, there's a warning which should be there for anything which is shared out of domain by a user, and that is turned on. So stuff which is mapped to Google's best practice recommendations gets a green checkbox, which means that, look, this is great, you've configured it the right way. And stuff which isn't quite there to Google's recommendations gets a gray box along with a reason as to why we think you should turn this recommendation on. And in some cases, you may choose to actively turn it off by choice. But with this, you can quickly go through the different security settings you have and figure out which of the settings you should turn on versus which ones you want to keep off for whatever reason. Now, the next use case I want to talk about is what is the best protection against phishing and malware, and how do I configure those protections? Now, Gmail, as I said, the advanced anti-phishing protections are turned on by default. So if you look at the safety settings within Gmail, you'll see that we automatically protect against encrypted attachments. We identify links behind shortened URLs. We scan linked images as well. And all this is turned on by default. We also have very advanced spoofing protections, which holds true for similar name protections as well. So if you have an email coming from a domain outside your organization, but that domain is similar sounding or similar, it's similarly spelled to your own domain, we will flag those emails. And similarly, if there is an email which comes in and the person is coming from, their name is similar to an employee within the organization, we'll present a banner saying that, look, this is coming from someone whose name is similar to someone within your organization, so be careful as you reply to that email. And that's where these protections are very handy, because they provide guidelines for users so that they can become part of that security ecosystem. We also have something called Security Sandbox, which essentially is a virtual machine wherein any attachment which is coming in, which we find suspicious, we spin up a virtual machine, we detonate this attachment within the virtual machine to see what the attachment is doing behind the scenes. And if we find that the attachment is unsafe, we can block it. Now, next up, I want to talk about the Advanced Protection Program. Now, the Advanced Protection Program is available to all G Suite users. Now, with the Advanced Protection Program, we do a bunch of additional things, for specific accounts which enrolled in the Advanced Protection Program. The first thing is we enforce security keys. The second thing is we limit access to apps which are trusted by the admin. And the third thing is we perform enhanced email scanning for those accounts enrolled in the Advanced Protection Program. It's super simple. You can click Enable User Enrollment, and then users can go to this link, click on Get Started, enroll with a security key, and it will ask you for your password once again as you enroll in this. And I can add a main key. I can click on Next. It's super simple. It's detecting a key in my system, and I allow this key to be accessed, and I can name a security key right here. And I need to register one more security key, and then I'm set. I'm enrolled in the Advanced Protection Program, which has the strongest protections Google offers for account security. And the next use case I want to talk about is how can I control access to sensitive information based on the attributes of users or devices. Now, within the admin console, we have something called Contextaware access, which essentially means that based on what the location of the user is, based on the kind of device they have, we can set certain access levels. So in this case, we have limited access to Drive to only individuals who are within Europe, because that's a certain policy and you can apply it within a certain organizational unit as well. So right now, since Contextaware access is turned off, I do have access to Drive. Now I am going to turn on Contextaware access, and because I am based in the US, my access to Drive, and policy is only to allow access for people based in the UK, my device automatically will be denied access. So let's check this out. So as I can see, I don't have access to Drive anymore. And with that, let me welcome Chad Tyler to walk you through the next few use cases.
Thanks, Sam. So the first scenario that I want to cover is how you can prevent, detect, and remediate data exfiltration in your organization. One of the best ways to prevent data exfiltration is to use a data loss prevention, or DLP, rule. You can get to those rules by going to the admin console in G Suite. So this is the view of the landing page. Going to the left-hand menu here, Security, Data Protection. And then I'm going to click on Manage Rules. Now this is where I'd see all of my rules related to Drive data loss prevention. And so I've gone ahead and I've pre-created a rule called Project Zanzibar. In our scenario, Project Zanzibar is a very sensitive project for our organization. It's something that we don't want any of our users sharing anything externally. So what we've done is we've created a data loss prevention rule that looks across the entire organization, looks for whenever a file is shared, tries to match on the word Zanzibar, and if it does, it will block external sharing. So we've pre-created that rule. Now what that looks like, if an end user goes to a file that contains the word Zanzibar, like this one, what they'll see is that the sharing icon has actually changed. So you'll see that it's a shield instead of the normal sharing icon, and it has this hover text that says document contains sensitive content. Now this is really important because it's a step toward educating end users on the types of files that are sensitive. We want them to understand when they're looking at something that might be potentially something that should be kept internal and shouldn't be shared externally. If the user does decide that they want to share this, or maybe they don't see these warnings, if they come in and they try to share to a user that's external, so let's say inc42.com, and they try to share this with that user, they'll actually get a warning that says, hey, this file contains restricted content. This shouldn't be shared outside of our organization. If they try to share through a link, it actually won't show any options that are outside the organization. So in that way, we both educate the end user, but we also prevent them from taking steps that could be potentially damaging or could share content that is very sensitive to our organization. So data loss prevention rules are very effective in preventing exfiltration. One of the other really nice things about data loss prevention rules is they're tied into some of our other security offerings, like the investigation tool. So you'll see on any of your data loss prevention rules, if they click on investigate rule, this will actually take them to the investigation tool, which will pre-populate the ID of that rule or the title of that rule, and it will show them when that rule has triggered in the past. So in this case, we see 4 different events, and they're all related to this project Zanzibar, and they're sharing files that actually look fairly sensitive. So they're things like exec review, revenue targets, user growth. They're things we probably don't want shared externally, and it looks like it's just one user, Chad Tyler in this case, that is sharing these files externally. So what we can do from here is we can actually pivot on this user, and we can see what else they've been sharing. So one of the nice things about data loss prevention rules is they actually block the user from sharing these files. So we don't have to worry as much about these files, but if this user is sharing, trying to share these files externally, they might be trying to share other files externally. So let's pivot on this user. So we're going to click on that user's name and go to pivot to, and go to drive log events where they're an actor. And then we're going to look for events where they're sharing a file that was internal and they're sharing it externally. And the specific event we want to see is change access scope. So we're going to search for those and see what we find. So we see that they've actually been sharing, they had shared a few files related to Zanzibar before we created our rule, and they're also sharing things related to Project Elysium, which is another very sensitive project in our organization. So we can see that this user has been sharing quite a few things. We might want to take steps to remediate that. So we've detected this issue, now we want to go in and remediate it. So we can select these events, we can go to Actions, Audit File Permissions. Now this is a view in the investigation tool, and it lets you have better visibility into how files are shared. Think of it as kind of like a sharing dialog for admins. And so you can see here most of these users are from my pretend domain, but this user is from Inc42. So we can actually go and we can remove that user. So we can act file by file here and kind of get an idea of what's going on, or we can select all of them and act in bulk. So we can remove that Chad Inc42 user here. We can also look at how these files are shared through links, and we see that all of these are currently shared publicly. So we could go in and we could change those to restricted, so that's no longer an issue for us. So we've remediated that kind of initial threat here. That's a quick view of how you can prevent, detect, and remediate data exfiltration in G Suite, and that's just one quick example of how that might work. The next scenario I want to talk about is how you can create a rule for automating alerts or taking remediative actions. So we're going to continue forward with the same investigation we were just looking at. We've remediated the initial threat, but if this user is sharing sensitive files, it might happen again. This user might try to share additional files. They might try to exfiltrate data that is very sensitive to our organization. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to this same investigation, and we're actually going to create what we call an activity rule. So within the investigation, you can take a specific query that you've done, and in this case we're going to use the query that's looking for this user when they're sharing externally and when they're changing the access scope on a file. And we're going to go to this three-dot menu here at the right and click on Create Activity Rule. And we're going to call this data exfiltration. And so you'll see that it pulled in our query. In this case, it's a fairly simple query, but this could be very complex. It could have a lot of nesting in it. It's basically the result of the investigation that we've been doing, and all of those types of queries would work as one of these rules. So we're going to take that query and use it for this rule. And what this does is it generates a preview of when this has happened in the past. So you see that this user wasn't doing much in the last month besides more recently. So this may point to a problem with their account, which we will deal with in another scenario here in a second. But in this case, we're just going to create this rule to alert. So we want to create this rule that if this triggers within 24 hours, if this happens more than 0 times, or if it even happens once, we want to know about it. So we're going to add alerting to this rule. We're going to set the severity to medium, or it could be high if we're really worried about it. And then we want to let our admin group know if this happens. So we're going to add our admin group to this alert so that they get an email when this happens. Now you could also add actions in a lot of different data types. Say for Gmail, you could create both an alert and quarantine the emails. In Drive, we don't have actions yet. So in this case, we're just going to create an alert. Next, we're going to review the rule. So we've named it data exfiltration. It's for the entire domain. This is the query that it will be running if it even happens once, or if it happens more than 0 times. We want it to trigger, and we're going to set it to active mode. We could also set it to monitor mode if we just wanted to see what the rule would do without actually triggering, and we could do that. But in this case, we're just going to set it to active, and then we're going to create this rule. And so what this looks like is if we go to the Alert Center, under Security Alert Center, if this ever triggers, we would see the result here. And so we actually do see that this has triggered. So if we click into this alert, we'll get kind of metadata around what's happening. And we see the actual query here, so we can better understand what the rule is doing. We can assign this to someone, set the severity to a different severity if we want to, but we can also investigate. So the nice thing about Alert Center as well is that all of these alerts are tied into the investigation tool. So if we click on Investigate Alert here, that will actually take us to an investigation in the investigation tool, which will show us kind of events related to that alert. We can see that this user has been sharing files related to Elysium again. So we can select that, and then we can go in and take actions as I showed you in the previous scenario. And so all of these things are tied together. So you can get a lot more visibility. You can get these real-time alerts for when these events are happening, and then you can quickly go in, investigate, and then potentially create a DLP rule to prevent this from happening again, or potentially take action against the user depending on the scenario and what's happening. So that's a quick view of how you can set up alerts and remediative actions, how you can automate those things using activity rules in the investigation tool. The last scenario I want to walk through is how can admins work together to resolve security incidents. So we're going to come back to this same investigation that we've been working in. And we've seen that this user that we've seen throughout this demo has been trying to share a lot of sensitive files, and that's happened fairly recently. It may point to a issue with their account. So what we're going to do is try to suspend that user. Now the problem is the account that we've been doing this investigation on is not in charge of user accounts. So I can't take action on user accounts from this admin account. And so what I want to do is I want to share it with my colleague Robin. And Robin is in charge of our user accounts, and so she'll be able to investigate a little bit more from what we've done, and then potentially suspend the user if she feels like that's the right approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this investigation that I've been working on, and I'm going to call it data exfiltration demo. And I'm going to save that. And then this banner appears at the top when I save this investigation. And now I can share this, and I'm going to share this with Robin. And I'm going to share this with her. Now that that's shared, if I switch to to Robin's account, what I'll see is that I've actually received this email from the other account called Data Exfiltration Demo. Now if I click on this, it takes me to the investigation tool, and I can see here what the other admin has done. So they've queried on this DLP rule. They got results back around what's been happening. They pivoted to Drive to look at what else the user was sharing, and they're sharing files related to Elysium and Zanzibar. So it looks like this user account may have issues. So we actually do want to take action on this user. So we'll select their user account. We'll pivot to see what their account is looking like. And we see that they're actually a super admin, that they don't have 2SV. So this is a very, very sensitive account. So we're not going to take any risks. We're just going to select this user, and we're going to go and we're going to suspend that user. And here I can type in a reason for why I'm doing this. Data exfiltration, possible. And then we're going to suspend that user. So that quickly, two admins can work together. One of the nice things about this is as you're working the investigation tool, it kind of maintains history of what you've been doing. So you can actually save that and share it with another admin, and that other admin can then continue to work on what you've done. And so you can start to separate out some of the roles and responsibilities of the admin in your organization, but they can still work effectively, whether that be through different roles or time zones or regions. So that's a quick view of how admins can work together to resolve security incidents. And so that's all we have for you today. I want to thank my colleague Sam Lugani for joining us.
Thanks for taking the time.
Again, this was a very demo-focused session. If this is something that you enjoyed, we'd love to get your feedback so we can do more of this. Thank you.